We continue our position preview series. This time, small forward is up on the docket. Where can Brandon Miller go in his second season in the NBA? Plus, there's a new signing for the Charlotte Hornets. We'll get to all of it today on Locked On Hornets.
You are Locked On Hornets, your daily Charlotte Hornets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
In a minute, cuz we live.
It's Locked On Hornets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Thanks for making us your first listen. We are free. We are available anywhere you get your podcast, and that includes YouTube. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. All you have to do is place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets. Guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started again. FanDuel.com. There's Doug Branson. Find him on his Substack, everyhornetsboxscore.com. Also on Twitter at Doug Branson LOH, and I'm on Twitter at Walker Mehl. Listen to me, WFNZ, every weekday, 12 to 3 p.m., where you can hear, hopefully, more positive episodes to come about the Carolina Panthers. We had a great show today. You know, I guess Wes really isn't a Panthers fan. Neither is Flounder. So I was having a one-man party, but I was excited. Andy Dalton going out there and looking like Tom Brady. I called him Red Favre on Twitter. Just gunslinging, accuracy, dropping dimes, Dalton dimes, Red Rifle, all the nicknames in the world, man. Like, it feels so good that the Panthers have the same record as San Francisco, as Baltimore, as Dallas, perennial playoff teams. We're right there after our first win of 2024.
No, I'm proud of the Panthers. I'm a little disappointed only because I wanted the Charlotte Hornets to go into this season, the same way that they went into last season, trying to get the first win of the year versus the Panthers.
That's right. Yes. I forgot about that.
But I'm happy for the team, and I can do the Hornets tie-in, okay? Because I was watching that game closely to see how the team was going to respond to a new quarterback, a quarterback that had some experience, a quarterback that could make a deep throw. And as soon as Dalton led that first drive, it seemed like there was a new sense of belief that permeated all throughout every aspect of that team. Defense, special teams. I saw every aspect of the Carolina Panthers play better than they had in the previous 2 weeks and honestly in quite a long time. And it made me think about the Charlotte Hornets and how they'll be getting LaMelo Ball back, their quarterback. They will be getting him back. And I hope that if he stays healthy, it will instill a different sense of belief all down the Hornets roster, that they will believe that they could compete for a postseason spot, that it'll make them play defense better, that it'll make them hold on to the basketball better, that all aspects of the game, every player will improve just by virtue of the fact that when you look on the court, you see a guy that and say, this guy can help us get to the postseason. And, I think that's what's happening with the Panthers right now.
Yeah, Andy Dalton going in at QB, it absolutely reset all expectations, especially after you saw them go for an opening drive touchdown and then hang 36 on the Raiders, who had been playing some pretty damn good defense. It felt like a proof of concept game for Dave Canales. I know it's only his third game in, but the proof of concept with a new head coach, I wonder if we're going to get that from Charles Lee soon. Okay, so the NFL is a 17-game regular season. Not many games. The NBA, there's 82. There's a ton. So we're looking at different timelines, right? With the Hornets, we're probably talking about maybe like your first 20 games or so, your first quarter of the season. How much are we going to be asking for proof of concept with Charles Lee based on some of the things that he's talked about, right? LaMelo, he's going to be important for our pace. We want to be able to protect the basket, protect the rim. We want to be able to play better defense this year. Having guys that are healthy, maybe this isn't even a proof of concept for Charles Lee, but even so for just having the guys that are healthy out there on the court, maybe proof of concept for the team, right? Hey, when LaMelo and Brandon and Mark are all healthy, that is our young core. If they all share the floor together at the same time for a meaningful amount of games, this experiment can actually work, especially with a new head coach. So I wonder how important it is for this team to get off to a good start, just to go ahead and erase as much doubt as possible to start the season. That's what I'm interested in. Do you hit the ground running where like you're 6-4 in your first 10 games and now you start to create a little buzz and everybody's excited about what you could become, all the league pass titles that you've been given, like you're living up to it. I wonder just how important it is for this team to get off to an early start and prove, you know what, the way we were thinking this offseason, and we're going to justify it sooner rather than later.
Yeah, listen, it would be great to put up a lot of wins in the first 20 games. There's no doubt about that. But let's be real. Like, the Hornets are not going to be Eastern Conference Finals contenders this season. And so, getting off to a great start is not as important for this team in terms of wins and losses than it would be for a Boston or a Milwaukee or on down the line. Now, what I think is important in terms of proof of concept is that we see the Charlotte Hornets trying on defense in a way that we haven't seen them before, giving effort in all aspects of the game. It would be nice to see them jump out of the gates like the Hornets did in Summer League. And in Summer League, they were able to pile up a bunch of wins. But we saw certain players like Nick Smith Jr. give effort on the defensive end and execution on the defensive end that we haven't seen from him previously and some other guys as well. And you saw just the team come together over the summer in a way that I'd like to see the varsity squad do when this season starts. It will prove that Charles Lee has been able to come in with his championship pedigree and say, look, guys, I know what it takes to win a championship. I've been to the mountaintop. And if you follow me, and if we do these things, and if we commit and we do the hard stuff, and we take everything seriously and everything matters, then maybe we don't win every game. Maybe we don't win a majority of the games, but we're going to change the Hornets' DNA. I think that's got to be the focus, and that's what we have to see in those first couple of games. Do these young players respond to what Charles Lee is throwing down?
Yeah, I'm hoping that we don't see what is a terrible start like the Panthers got off to if we're going to continue to try to compare these two teams. The 0-2 where everything is gross. For instance, the Panthers won by double digits against the Raiders, and they still have among the worst point differentials in all of football through 3 games. Like, it was so bad in the first 2 contests that even a double-digit victory over the Raiders, where like you didn't rout them, but you won pretty handily. Yeah, that would be bad. Even if it's not important to get off to this, over 500 start in the first 10 or 20 games of the season, you still don't want to look like you did last year. Even with some things working against you via the injuries that you accumulated, you would still like to get off to a better start than what you got to last year. And so perhaps there's a happy medium there to get into. Like, I keep going with the first 20 games. It feels like math people will tell you like that's the first real sample size you go with. So we'll see where they are once they get into the depths of November. That would be interesting.
Agreed.
There we go. Okay. All right, let's move on. Let's actually get to the position preview coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Bees everywhere!
It's not Eric Collins. I like it, though. Seems like an old soundbite from the Bees machine. Small forward, Brandon Miller. What kind of leap can he make in year 2? That's all still to come here on Locked On Hornets. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Again, FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. More Locked On Hornets ahead. Position preview time, an interesting position because Brandon Miller, we think, is going to play most of his time at small forward. It makes sense to us, right? If we were going based off what he played last year, then we would have talked about him in the shooting guard spot. But we think the starting lineup is going to look like LaMelo at the 1, Josh Green at the 2, Brandon at the 3, Miles 4, Mark Williams 5, Grant Williams, maybe Vasa, Trey Mann, all kind of fighting for the 6th through 7th, 8th spots off of the bench. But we start with Brandon here, Doug, because we think he's going to start there, and he's the type of archetype that you would say is the most valuable in the league. This is why somebody that can handle the basketball, shoot really well, be an all-NBA type player with such a unique skill set. Not unique, I should say, but it's a rare one. So we're hoping that Brandon can take a leap into all-star status, possibly this year, continue to climb the ladder into where, okay, year 3, he'll be an all-star and then maybe even all-NBA level player once we get further into his career. But clearly the big question is, what kind of leap does Brandon Miller make at number 3?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think a lot of it's going to depend on if he's gotten any bigger, if he's gotten any stronger, because I think, part of his offensive limitations last season were in getting to the rim. So, improving his ability to take contact and get to the rim will increase his isolation numbers, which were not very good last season. 5% of his possessions, so not a ton of isolation looks that the Hornets generated for him or that he generated for himself. A lot of those went to Miles Bridges instead. And in those isolation looks, he was in the 19th percentile in terms of points per possession. When you compare that to some of the other ways that he got his offense, pick and roll ball handler, off screen, handoff, where he was all above average, it just wasn't very good in isolation. And so, I think a couple of things are going to happen offensively for him. One, we've already gotten this hint that Charles Lee is going to take some of his mid-range looks, convert them into three-point shots. I think that's going to help his efficiency, the ceiling on his scoring ability. And then also, obviously, just getting bigger and stronger and being able to increase those isolation looks, because eventually the Hornets will have to look to him to do that kind of thing. Playoffs, you throw the defenses, really clamp down on the paint, and you got to throw it to a guy and say, go give me a bucket. And I think Brandon Miller will eventually become that player. Just the question is, in year 2, how much closer is he to that player?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? 19th percentile, it's not very good. It's also totally fine for a first-year player to only be in the 19th percentile on limited volume already on ISO possessions. But it is funny, Doug, that number totally matches the eye test. There are some times you look at advanced metrics and you think, oh, buddy, I would have had all that wrong. I would not have predicted that percentile, that number. That makes total sense to me that he ranked pretty low on ISO possessions. And with Miles, you're right. I would like to have those roles flipped. I would like to see at some point Brandon get more ISO possessions. One, because we're just kind of baking into the conversation that Brandon will get better at that as he progresses in the NBA. I would like to see Brandon get some of those ISO possessions and Miles be the guy that's playing more so off ball. That's why I think he'll probably be that third option where, okay, swing, defense rotates, Miles takes advantage of them trying to recover. Now you're dealing with a bowling ball, getting downhill with some space. Now you got momentum, slam, right? Maybe we even get more dunks from Miles Bridges in that role, and we've talked about that. But with Brandon, part of the value that you get with that type of basketball player, the high-end outcome that you see with Brandon drafting him number 2, it's the fact that you can give him the basketball and say, okay, you're 6'9", you have handle enough to where you're not going to turn it over, take your guy off the dribble, and get to your spot. Is it a three-point shot in the playoffs? Go ahead and let the mid-range jumpers fly. Of course, we've talked about it ad nauseum, trying to get to the basket, finishing. The athleticism is if he gets a runway to dunk on you, and then he'll put you on a poster. But the short area quickness, it's not quite there. And that's where you see a lot of his ISO possessions stall out, Doug. That's why he was settling for a lot of mid-range jumpers, is because he wasn't strong enough, maybe quick enough to get by his guy. And that's why you would take some of the mid-range jumpers. He would hit a decent amount of them, but you'd like for him to get to the cup and then finish and or get to the foul line. That's where the efficiency lies. But I'm ready to see him progress in that area, and I bet he does. Brandon is a guy that showed you can bet on him, and you'll reap the benefits if you put your money on Brandon progressing.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, in his rookie season, he showed just how quickly he could pick up on concepts and how quickly he could not only just become a starter by virtue of the injuries, but look like a legitimate starting 2 or 3 in the league last season. And so, Steve Clifford praised him over and over with his ability to throw things at Brandon, and Brandon just in one practice being able to quickly adjust, put it into his game. These concepts that I think rookies struggle with early on, the complexities of the NBA game, particularly with team defense and some of the offensive schemes. He's been able to do a lot of that in his rookie season. And so now the question is, catapulting into the second season, how much of that intel that you glean through experience and scouting that you do, just what happens upstairs as you compete against certain players, how much of that are you going to put into your game and grow? And I think this next season for Brandon will tell us a lot about just how fast he's going to get to all-star status, to all-NBA status, to becoming one of the better 2 or 3s in the league. Like how much growth we see this season. I don't think he will become any of those things this season, but we'll see how much he can accelerate, just by getting these opportunities. And hopefully it's opportunities with LaMelo Ball, with Miles Bridges, with Mark Williams, because that's only going to make things easier on Brandon Miller if he can play more off ball. One quick thing on Miles Bridges and his isolation looks. He was in the 42nd percentile, so not terrible, below average.
Yeah, it makes total sense. Yeah, right. Just a tick below average, right.
But 11% of his possessions versus 5% of Brandon Miller's possessions, so he's doing it more. And I was watching some tape on Miles Bridges and his dunks last season, and so many, almost all of them. I don't know that he got a single dunk on isolation. I think all of them came off screen, off passes. So he's not that. I don't know if he can be that guy again, but he wasn't that guy last season.
Yeah, if he says he has it back, right? He says he has his athleticism back, and there's reason to believe that could be true. If you haven't played for the 92 games that he missed, if you had that much time where you weren't playing NBA basketball, then maybe it does take a while to knock off the rust. Maybe it does take, the 72 games that he was available to knock off all the rust. We'll see. But I do think also some of it was roll. And if you think that more dunks come his way, which I actually think I do. Like if I had a stat draft and I were to...
We do. We got to finish that, by the way.
We do. The good news is we get to make up like when we finish that. Like there's no already set criteria. We can do 3-4 rounds if we want. But I probably would draft a higher dunk percentage from Miles this year than what he had last year, which was a career low. I don't think it'll be a lot higher, but if I were forced to draft that, then I'd probably pick the over on that. But yeah, like those numbers make sense to me, man. A below average ISO player, you want him to go back to third option. That makes total sense to me. I did have one question for you too, and then you can get to your point as well. Do you think Brandon Miller or Miles Bridges has the second highest usage percentage on volume this year? Who do you think ends up having it? Because that's going to be a big question to me.
I think Brandon Miller, because
I do too.
Yeah, I think this coaching staff understands that Miller is going to, regardless of how this contract works out, I think Miller's going to be here longer than Miles Bridges. So you want to, and he showed so much confidence and ability to adapt and ability to pick up concepts last season that there's going to be no issue with giving him more usage. You know what I'm saying? Like typically with younger players, sometimes that can hurt them. Sometimes that can hurt the team. I don't necessarily think that would be the case with Brandon Miller. So I think he's ready for it. He can take that responsibility. He wants that responsibility. That's what you love about Brandon Miller in his rookie season. He got more responsibility because there were injuries. But it was also a low pressure situation because the Hornets, they weren't expected, even if they were healthy, they weren't expected to do a lot. And then after the injuries, they certainly weren't expected to do a lot. But he didn't treat it like a low-pressure situation. He went into it. He's a very serious player, so there's going to be no problems with that. And going back to something we talked about at the beginning of this segment, whether he'll play the 2 or the 3, we have him slotted in at 3 right now because we think Josh Green's going to start. But I think if Josh Green is a disaster offensively, then I can definitely see Charles Lee hitting the eject button on that and saying, all right, Brandon 2, and then 3 Miles, 4 Grant Williams. I could also see if the Hornets, get sneaky and get into the play-in and then somehow make a miracle run into the playoffs. That's a chess move, that they could make, an adjustment that they could make to put Brandon at 2 and size up a little bit 3-4. So there's more versatility on this roster by virtue of the organization making good trades and going out and getting players and making sure you have depth. These things that seem basic that they haven't done in many years. Now they have some positional versatility, and it'll be fun to watch.
If the theme is proof of concept, there's really only one big move this offseason outside of the NBA draft that would be able to prove, or you'd be able to prove what you did and justify it. Like, what does Josh Green look like in, I think, what's going to be a very similar role, but just same role, but different environment here with the Hornets. So, that'll be interesting to see how well he plays at that 2 spot. But if Brandon has good height at the 3, he's got phenomenal height at the 2. They don't make him much taller than Brandon Miller playing that shooting guard. So I love to see it, and that's why we saw him pretty effective there last year. Okay, coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Bees everywhere!
Let's finish our thoughts on the type of year Brandon Miller could be in store for, plus get to some of the other small forwards on this team and get to the new signing with the Charlotte Hornets. It's all still to come on Locked On Hornets. But first, I must tell you about eBay Motors. This episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. It's the formula for winning championships, and it's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performances. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or you get your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. More Locked On Hornets ahead. Last few things on Brandon, just real quickly. I'm going to try to learn my lesson, Doug, with how I was talking about Mark Williams, where I kept talking about how his improvement was linear. It was on an escalator. And I'd spent so many years prior saying improvement does not always have to be on an escalator. Yet Mark Williams always began he always ended better than where he began, right? It doesn't matter what level of basketball you're talking about. He always got better every single season. Last year, injury certainly had a problem with that. But like even when he was out there, there were more issues. So with Brandon Miller, I'm going to try to learn my lesson because I think you have such high expectations for him. We could see him go into this year. And sometimes rookies experience either a down year or just never get back the magic that was there their rookie season. It's actually not all that uncommon. I don't think that's going to happen with Brandon. That's the big picture is a disaster scenario. The following year is okay, that was a blip on the radar. We'll see how he can recover. But with Brandon being able to get to his spots, answering some of the concerns that I had coming out of Alabama, right? Got to his spots, got his shot off despite a low release. The handle I was a little worried about, totally fine. Feel comfortable with him having the basketball in his hands. I actually really like his vision. I didn't think I thought it would show up more last year, and it didn't. I still think his vision is very good for being like a secondary ball handler. Everybody's all in on Brandon. I'm trying to chill going into this year and not fall into the same trap that I did with Mark Williams, just expecting him to be so much better and not giving any leeway for some possible growing pains that a lot of players experience.
No, I think, listen, I think the circumstances are going to be so much different this season with playing more with LaMelo Ball. Defensively, I think the matchups are going to be way friendlier for him because you've got Josh Green and you've got Mark Williams helping. So, even when he gets punished, it's going to be less punishing if that guy's healthy. So, yeah, I just think circumstances are going to be different. And also, I would worry about it more if he spent most of last season on the bench, and then got elevated to the starting lineup once the Hornets were out of contention or something. But he was elevated to the lineup early. He faced a lot of challenges last season, had a few little injuries that he was able to work back into the lineup. So, I don't know. I just didn't see much. I don't see much that could be thrown at him this season that he hasn't already experienced and really stepped up to the challenge and met it and exceeded it.
Yeah, he's so with it mentally, the confidence. Even if he's not hitting shots the first 3 quarters, he's going to hit them in the fourth, and you love to see it. Staying it or clanging, baby. 2 questions. 1, Doug, who do you have listed as the depth pieces at small forward? And 2, is the position staying it or clanging?
Yeah, so right now I have Cody Martin as the backup, and then behind him Seth Curry, which he's kind of in that sort of guard forward sort of. Shooting guard, small forward kind of tweener zone. But those are the 2. So, you've got a big question mark there with Cody Martin, health, consistency in terms of his health. Can he stay on the floor? And then will his offense return? Because remember, before all of the injury stuff, this guy had turned into a sudden marksman from three, one of the best 3-point percentages in the league for a while there, a couple of seasons ago, and that's what got him the contract extension. And then, of course, he goes through all of the injuries, comes back, and can't hit a shot anymore. And so, that's going to be vital. Can he find that again? And then with Seth Curry, he gets released, and then they bring him back. But last season, he was a little secret weapon for them, not just with, his ability to kind of, knock down a few outside shots, but also get into the mid-range and punish you as well. But also with his passing, in that little section post-trade deadline, he was one of the better playmakers for the Charlotte Hornets. It was interesting to see.
Smart ball player offensively. Felt good about him being on the court. Just was real cozy, comfortable. Yeah, totally fine. And Seth Curry coming back on a really cheap contract, not making much money at all as a depth piece. Plus, we have to consider Miles, even though we're going to have him at the 4. Do we consider Salon at all, or is it pretty much 4 and small ball 5 for Salon? Tickling the small forward spot, maybe just a little bit. It's just going to depend, right?
If he's going up against a huge 4, then you probably don't play him. If he's going up against, a stretch 4, then I think you're more comfortable with Salon out there. I would see definitely Salon more as a 4 than a 3.
Yeah, I agree.
You hope he evolves into somebody that's comfortable playing 3 or 4 and or even being, sort of point forward. That's kind of the high end of what that kind of, upside could lead itself to. But yeah, just his first season, if he gets any action at all, I think it's got to be the 4.
Let's not ask him to do too many things. Just too much stuff seems to be there at the 3. Let's leave some of the stuff off of your plate by putting you at 4, where I think you could hide offensively and defensively at times a little more so. So
let's also put more on his actual plate. Let's put more. He needs to put on some weight. He's got to bulk up. To Brandon too. Let's put some more. Let's put a second helping of mashed potatoes, more mac and cheese. Let's get some meat on these guys' bones. Cody Martin, Seth Curry, those are your reserves. Stangin or Clangin, the small forward position for the Charlotte Hornets.
Yeah, going with your group, Brandon Miller himself would make this Stangin. If you're talking about a guy that is neck and neck with LaMelo as far as who the fans feel like this team belongs to, then maybe his presence alone allows you to say Stangin. Once you consider the depth pieces, as much as I think Seth Curry is a fun guy coming off the bench, I probably view him as more of a 2. And then Cody Martin, you just can't depend on him. You just can't do it. So I would say Clangin. If you consider every depth, it's Clangin.
You kind of froze up there right at the end of that.
I saw that.
Let's go to.
You just want to ask you want to ask Stangin or Clangin again, and then you can, as soon as you're done. That makes sense to me, right?
Yeah, I'll just go to you full here. So I've asked the question.
And then I'll begin answering it here. Okay. Yeah. I'm still a little choppy. You want me to wait?
No, it's good. Go for it.
Okay. Just go ahead. All right. Yeah, Brandon Miller, himself, probably calls this position to be Stangin. If you are the guy that so many members of the Hornets fan base question whether it's your team or LaMelo's, if you're neck and neck with LaMelo, then this position just might be Stangin based off that alone. I think when you consider depth, you can't trust Cody Martin to stay healthy. I hate it, but it is what it is. With Seth Curry probably being more of a 2, but even so, as much as I like him on the cheap deal, the depth is still tough. And by the way, a lot of teams are dealing with depth issues at what is a harder skill set to fill at the small forward spot. I think overall, when you consider depth and if that carries a lot of weight for you, I would say that this position is probably Clangin.
Yeah, it's with the potential to stang. It's Clangin with a lot of potential to stang. Because, look, Cody Martin could pull out of this tailspin of injuries. Mm-hmm. And, we've seen a version of Cody Martin that would make this position stangin. It's a little bit of a long shot, but it's there. But I agree with you. Emotionally, it's stangin because I think we see the hope in Brandon Miller. We see all of that. But if I'm saying stangin or Clangin relative to the rest of the NBA, right? And I think, point guard wise, the only one we've given Stangin to is point guard because you've got LaMelo A top 100 list has already rated him top 50. And then you've got Vasa Micic, who, is super experienced. So that's staying. But I think with this one, there's depth concerns. And Brandon Miller, I would be ready to make this staying at the end of this season once Brandon Miller has made clear to all of us that he's on the scene, and that scene is future All-NBA player.
Okay, what-if game. Doug, set us up for the what-if game.
Yeah, so the what-if game, portals open up in Spectrum Center, Avengers Endgame style, and out walks the last playoff team in Hornets history. Hopefully not the very last team. the last one to do it until this season, 2015-16 Hornets, they walk out, and so Charles Lee has a decision to make: who starts, who sits, who's the reserve. So we got 3 spots available. And in terms of the 15-16 small forwards, according to Basketball Reference, we've got Nick Batum. We've got P.J. Hairston, who was, I guess we can't count P.J. because he was traded. These portals opened up after the playoff series was over. So P.J.'s not on the team anymore. Okay. So it's really just Nick Batum and Michael Kidd-Gilchrist. They walk out. You got to implement them into this Brandon Miller conversation. What do you do?
Wow, this one's tough. Yeah, this one's really hard for me because so much of how much we believe in Brandon Miller lies in the future. Nick Batum got paid close to a max contract because of the performance that he had this year that we're talking about. Yeah. And not many people were questioning it. Like, there wasn't many. I can remember George Sedano questioning Nick Batum in a contract year. That was the only guy I remember that looked at that a little sideways. But other teams were going to do it. Dallas was going to do it. Oh, my God, Doug.
Well, can I give you an out? Can I give you a little bit of an out here
please,
as a conversation point? Like, because I think we started Courtney Lee for the shooting guard. I mean, honestly, if this happened, I would start both Batum and I would start Brandon Miller. So it would be whatever, 2, 3. Those guys would be your wings with LaMelo Ball at point guard, and then we'll wait on the other conversations. But that's a
lot of size. Yeah,
that's what I would do. And then MKG, I mean, you're throwing him in there as a backup, defensive player. And then, you add Courtney Lee as a backup there. So to me, if we're just constructing this team, that's how you do it, in my opinion.
Yeah, the only thing is, like, do I want MKG coming off of the bench, or do I want the offensive spark plug to come off of the bench, which is what Brandon Miller would suit best, just wrecking shop against twos and against worst players in the league. So perhaps we go with the Steve Clifford mantra. You start your best defensive 5, and then you bring in an offensive guy off of the bench to just, again, wreak havoc on all these other bench players. And then when you get to your closing lineups, maybe you want Brandon in there, and then so you play with the lineup a little more. Maybe that's the move, Doug. Maybe we just go like Batum / MKG, bring Brandon off of the bench and allow him to like eat and, compete for 6th man of the year.
So MKG, 205 minutes played. Remember, that was the year that, I think we got 7 games of glory. And it's tough. It's going to be tough to depend on him for really anything. But Nick Batum, on the other hand, 5 win shares that season, 14.9 points per game, 6 rebounds, and 5.8 assists. And so you're getting the whole package there, and it's already pre-built for you. And I think if you bench Nick Batum, you're going to get a worse Nick Batum. Like, I think you've got to find room for him in the starting lineup in this scenario. And look, I mean, Nick Batum, there were a lot of reasons why it didn't work out here in Charlotte, but he went on to play for other competing teams and show that he had a value. Yeah. Maybe not the value that matched the contract that he was given in Charlotte, but he had a value as a starter and a reserve later on. But yeah, I would go Nick Batum. I would go Brandon Miller. I'm going to cheat and say Kemba Walker. That's my 3.
I love it.
I'm going to cheat.
I love it. I love cheating, especially when it comes to hard questions on this show. Finally, the Hornets, they added a new player, Doug. Who is the new player that the Hornets added, perhaps the last player they'll add before preseason gets underway in early October?
Yeah, it's another big. It's Harry Giles. ACC fans might be familiar with this guy's game. He was a Dookie. We're hearing a lot about Duke and the Charlotte Hornets. A lot of connections. They're going to play training camp at Duke. Mark Williams played at Duke, and now you've got another big here in Harry Giles. A guy that presented as it wasn't late lottery. It was a little after the lottery. I think he went 17. And he presented a lot of upside, was definitely going to be a project, had some injury concerns, and unfortunately those injury concerns just kept cropping up year after year. I think it cost him nearly all, if not all, of his sophomore season. And then he was playing G League for the Clippers and got hurt again. The Clippers released him. So he's bounced around to a couple of teams, and here he is back with the hometown squad, the Charlotte Hornets, and looking for sort of a kind of a last chance, last dance opportunity to get back into the NBA, prove that he can stay healthy, and prove that his offensive game isn't as limited as maybe he did show when he was healthy in the league years prior.
Absolute monster in high school, was the number 1 rated player in high school, according to a couple of different outlets, and also is from Winston-Salem. So he's a hometown hero. North Carolina, Wake Forest, Duke. They all wanted him. Eventually he agrees to go to Duke. Kansas, also the big time college programs outside of the state, really wanted Harry Giles to attend their school. You're right. He suffered some injuries. He fell to, I think, 20th overall in the first round. So still, because of his potential, despite being so injury-ridden, like they still, NBA teams saw the body, they saw the defensive potential, they saw maybe some offensive role being in the dunker spot and being a lob threat, that maybe he could be a guy that worked out. And I think he had a pretty nice little run in the NBA, trying to salvage some more time here as his career may be coming to an end. I'll say this. Remember, Harry Giles was like the lone non-Hornets relation that was there at the Celtics celebration, right? It was Marquise Bolden. It was Brandon Miller. It was Grant Williams. They all had some kind of relationship with either Boston or, just whatever. It made sense with Charles Lee bringing all those guys to the team to celebrate with the Celtics. And Harry Giles was there. It was like, all right, I guess there's the Duke connection. That was about it. Sure enough, now he's a Charlotte Hornet before the season starts.
Here's what I love about this pickup that's very close to training camp is that really it's a pickup at a position where they do have a little bit of depth this season if you consider him a center, even if you consider him a power forward. I think the power forward position for the Charlotte Hornets a little bit more questionable, but they've got some big depth this season after adding Grant Williams, and they've added Taj Gibson. I don't know how much that guy's going to play, but it is like veteran depth. Okay. And, in years prior, the Hornets would be using this time right now to fill out their actual rotation roster, right?
It's about that time to get a point guard to save us.
Yeah, why not? So
Smith
that's
Jr.
not what this is. This is a legit, all right, we're going to take a flyer on a guy and see if he can come in and rescue his career in training camp. And if not, it's a low stakes kind of thing. I love this. Just, let's see what the guy can do. And I hope it's not a signal of Mark Williams' health. We keep getting these weird, is he healthy? Is he not healthy? Is he 100%? Is he not 100%? You go ahead and get a couple more bigs here. I don't know. I hope it's not that. We'll see, though. In a few weeks, we're going to get to talk to players. Players are going to have to show up in camp. We'll find out.
Yeah. No, I think this is smart business, taking a shot on Harry Giles. It has been kind of like an NBA hipster guy, too, for a while. A lot of people like him. All right, that'll do it for Locked On Hornets. Thanks for making us your first listen. We're free and available anywhere you get your podcast, and that does include YouTube. Also, make sure you check out Doug's Substack, everyhornetsboxscore.com, and you can listen to me on WFNZ every weekday from 12 to 3 p.m. Have a great rest of your day. We'll be back with you tomorrow.